I'm Abigail. I'm 34 years old and currently pregnant, which is why I'm taking a break from work and staying at home. I met my husband Christopher when I was 26 and we have been married for 7 years now. Our meeting was set up by a friend. This friend worked with Christopher and arranged for us to meet knowing that we were both looking for a relationship. At the time, it seemed like a casual party organized by a friend, but later I heard from that friend that it was actually arranged with the thought that Christopher and I might get along well. When Christopher found out, he left.
Looks like we have been set up.
But honestly, we're just grateful to our friend. Christopher, both then and now, is truly kind and considerate of those around him. At his company, Christopher was well-liked, and he had many friends. I found myself quickly drawn to him. However, I thought I was not a match for someone like Christopher. The reason lay in my educational background. Christopher graduated from Stanford University and was working in a major corporation, earning enough to be considered wealthy. In contrast, I was a dropout. Since dropping out, I had been working, but the jobs I could get were limited. I think I was some kind of manager at a fast food restaurant when I met Christopher. It seemed impossible that someone like me, a dropout, would catch the eye of Christopher, a highly educated man. I thought he wouldn't even bother to get to know me, but I was mistaken.
Hey, what's your name?
While everyone was having a great time, I was quietly drinking. Then Christopher sat next to me, offering a refreshing smile. I was completely taken aback. I never expected Christopher to speak to me. My name is Abigail. After I introduced myself, Christopher immediately asked for a nickname and started calling me Abby. His approach made me wonder, is he frivolous with the woman? But as we talked, I realized he was quite knowledgeable and entertaining. He was attentive to everyone's drinks, helped serve the food, and initiated conversations that kept everyone engaged. He really had a knack for making things lively. When it was time to leave, everyone decided to go to a second location, but I had things to do at home and had to decline. Then Christopher offered.
It's getting dark. I'll walk you home?
As everyone else dispersed, only Christopher and I walked towards my parents' house.
Do you have any siblings, Abby? You seem so composed.
During our walk, when our conversation fell into a quiet moment, Christopher, searching for a topic, asked me. I hesitated to talk about my family, but decided to be honest. Yes, actually, I come from a large family.
How big are we talking?
There are 8 of us?
8, including grandparents or something?
Seeing his surprised reaction and his thoughtful gesture, Christopher continued the conversation. No, actually, there are 6 of us siblings, including me. I replied with a wry smile. Christopher seemed even more surprised by my answer. I'm the second of my 6 siblings. The eldest is my brother, then comes me, followed by 3 younger sisters and a brother. At that time, the youngest brother was about 12 years old. Only 3 of us, my elder brother, one of my sisters, and I had reached adulthood and were working. The other 3 were still students living at home. Back then, my parents were always busy, so it became my routine to cook dinner and help with homework and studies. I had prepared dinner in advance that day, but I recall getting home around 8 p.m.
That's impressive. Is it tough every day?
He didn't have siblings himself, and I later found out that he was quite envious of my large family. But now, being married to me, he seemed happy to have my siblings as his in-laws. It's challenging, but every day is fun. I go shopping with my sisters, and we share all sorts of stories.
That sounds nice.
Our conversation about siblings continued for a while, and soon we arrived at my house. I stopped and told Christopher this was where I lived. Our house wasn't very large, but I think it was enough to accommodate a family with 6 children. Here we are. Christopher gazed at the house.
It's big,
Christopher said with a wry smile. Well, thank you for walking me home, I said, smiling back at him as I reached for the door. At that moment, if I had been braver, maybe I could have asked to exchange phone numbers with Christopher, but all the while we walked together, I couldn't shake the feeling that I didn't match up to him, so I resigned myself to not asking. However, to my surprise, Christopher stopped me and, blushing slightly, asked to exchange contact information. We swapped numbers right there and promised to meet again. After that, Christopher began to show more interest, sending me messages during his busy schedule even when there was no particular reason to do so. Somehow, his morning greetings and nighttime messages became a daily routine. During this time, we went on several dates, and about 3 months after we met, Christopher confessed his feelings to me. Although I wanted to be in a relationship, I still felt a gap in our educational backgrounds. I knew Christopher well enough to believe he wouldn't care about such things, but I couldn't bring myself to say it. I'm happy, but there's something I need to tell you before that. When I expressed my happiness, Christopher's face lit up, but his smile faded as I hesitated. I looked down, feeling nervous, trying to figure out how to say it. Christopher waited patiently as I remained silent. I am a dropout. That's my highest level of education. I was anxious. The moment I said it, I feared he would respond,
I can't date someone with such an educational background. It's impossible.
The fear of him saying something like that raced through my mind. Even now, but especially back then, I thought Christopher was the only one for me. If he rejected me because of this, I feared I might never get married.
It's just that? That doesn't matter.
Christopher said with a relieved smile, which caught me by surprise. I was utterly surprised by his relieved expression, something I hadn't expected at all.
I knew about it since we were introduced.
It seemed that Christopher didn't know the reasons behind my dropping out, but he had apparently learned everything else about me from our mutual friend. This meant that Christopher was fine with it all despite knowing about my educational background. Reassured by his words, I too felt a sense of relief and accepted Christopher's offer to start a relationship. The reason I ended up as a dropout was that around the time I entered middle school, my father, Caleb's business went bankrupt. My mom, Sadie, had just given birth to her 5th child and wasn't working. So when my dad lost his income, it became difficult to support 5 children. My older brother had been set to attend a prestigious private high school, but he decided to start working instead. Dad was actively looking for a job but couldn't find one. Mom began working, leaving the 1-year-old youngest sister in childcare. In the midst of this hectic home life, I spent my middle school years taking care of my sisters after school. When it was time to decide about high school, my parents asked me to give up on further education. I had expected this, so I accepted it with a smile, but deep down, I felt disappointed, wishing I could have at least completed high school. Despite these struggles, my parents somehow ended up pregnant with my brother, making me promise myself not to become an adult lacking in planning. At that time, Dad was trying to start his own business and we were living in extreme poverty. As the younger kids were still small, I worked part-time jobs while helping Mom. That's why I had to drop out. When I told Christopher about my past,
You've been through a lot.
He had tears in his eyes and said, since then, he has been supportive, encouraging me to pursue anything I want to. Well, our relationship continued, and in our 2nd year together, when I was 28, Christopher proposed. I was overjoyed and accepted, and he gave me a beautiful engagement ring. But after I accepted, Christopher shared a shocking fact about his family. It was about Christopher's family. It turns out his parents come from a long line of successful professionals like doctors and lawyers, and his mother, Autumn, is especially focused on academic achievement. Christopher's father, Ryan, isn't like that, but he's a quiet man who doesn't say much. So, Christopher said we needed to handle his mother, Autumn, somehow. I had never been so angry about Christopher keeping something from me until that moment. I hesitated to marry Christopher and was about to refuse, thinking it impossible. But Christopher seemed to have anticipated this.
I will protect you, and I will convince Mom, so there is no problem.
He insisted. Trusting him, I agreed to have a family meeting. When we went to meet his parents, Autumn initially welcomed me warmly, not knowing my educational background. However, during the conversation, she eventually brought up the topic of education. I remember a tense atmosphere developing between me and Christopher at that moment. "Which university did you graduate from, Abigail?" Autumn asked with a smile. Faced with her question, I found myself at a loss for words. Noticing my hesitation, Autumn's smile quickly vanished. "Well, actually, after graduating from middle school, I had to take care of my younger siblings. So I didn't go to high school or college." As I spoke honestly, Autumn's eyes sharpened. I confessed, unable to keep silent. She began to clear away the cake and coffee she had served me and stood up. "Please leave immediately. I do not approve of this marriage." Expecting this reaction, I looked down, unable to say anything. However, Christopher didn't give up so easily. He stood up, facing his mother.
"I want to marry Abby. No matter what Mom says, I'm going to marry her."
"What are you saying? A dropout? If people find out you're marrying a poor uneducated woman, who knows what they will say? She's not right for you. Break up with her immediately." Autumn retorted loudly to Christopher's insistence.
"I refuse. There is only Abby for me. I can't possibly marry anyone but Abby."
Perhaps this is what they mean by love is blind? Christopher, without any sign of embarrassment, asserted this confidently. His words made my face flush with warmth.
"If you don't accept it, then I'll sever my ties with you, Mom, to marry Abby."
He added, a statement so extreme that at first I thought, "That's embarrassing, but I'm happy," and then looked at Christopher in astonishment. Autumn reacted similarly, her eyes widening in shock, her mouth opening and closing in disbelief. "What did you say?" Autumn's face turned pale in an instant, and she looked so shocked that I thought she might faint. But I felt the same way. Choosing me over his family might be the greatest joy, but such a threatening statement would surely make it impossible for her to deny as a mother.
"Why not? Let's accept it. Abigail, please take good care of Christopher,"
Ryan said, who had been quiet until now, speaking in a calm and gentle voice without stirring. Then straightening his posture, he extended his hand towards me. Surprised by his gesture and still not fully comprehending the situation, I shook Ryan's hand. "Please, the pleasure is mine," I replied. Before I knew it, the wedding had passed, and Christopher and I were starting our life together in a new apartment. After that, it was clear that my relationship with Autumn wouldn't improve, which Christopher also understood, so we minimally interacted with her. Then, in the 7th year of our marriage, Christopher and I were blessed with a long-awaited son. Hoping that having a grandchild might change her, Christopher and I went to announce the pregnancy to Autumn, but her attitude remained unchanged. "Abort it immediately. You're a disgrace to our family as it is. Why bring more shame? A dropout's child will surely turn out the same." We weren't even allowed into the house. When we told her about the pregnancy, her eyes were cold, showing no sign of acceptance. Faced with this, Christopher and I resigned ourselves to the fact that mending the relationship was impossible. Christopher suggested it would be safer to avoid his parents until our son was born, and I agreed. A few months later, our son Joshua was born. My parents were overjoyed and deeply moved, and my siblings all came to see Joshua, showering him with love and adoration. However, Christopher's parents never came to see him, but Ryan sent a silver spoon to Christopher as a congratulatory gift along with a brief note, "Congratulations." The note from Ryan read, which greatly reassured both Christopher and me that he had accepted the situation. Time passed and I stayed close to Joshua, who was about to turn 6 months old. The event we were looking forward to when Joshua turned 6 months old was his half-birthday. As this was my first child and none of my siblings had ever celebrated a half-birthday, I plan to host a grand celebration based on information I gathered from the internet and friends inviting the family to join us. I had hoped to invite Christopher's parents as well, but Christopher was against it.
She won't come anyway. Even if she does, who knows what she might do. Let's not invite her,
he said. I felt disappointed, hoping they would at least see their grandson once, but if Christopher said so, I didn't insist on inviting them. I thought time might be needed, but eventually Autumn would accept us. Little did I know what would happen at the half-birthday celebration. A few days before the half-birthday party, Christopher received a call from Autumn. "Your child's half-birthday is coming up, isn't it? So I'll be coming over," Autumn said in a tone that was flat and even cold. Christopher was hesitant to accept Autumn's words, but I was happy that she was willing to come, seeing it as a step forward. On the day of the event, my parents and siblings arrived at our house first, bringing various things for Joshua. They brought milk, diapers, and even a monetary gift, filling me with happiness. After telling my family to make themselves at home, I began preparing for the half-birthday party. My family, along with Christopher, chatted and had fun taking turns holding and entertaining Joshua. Several hours after my family arrived, Christopher's parents also came. Christopher greeted them and they quickly made their way to the living room. Ryan was smiling and talking with Dad while looking at Joshua, but Autumn, sitting on a nearby sofa, seemed disinterested, merely watching the scene. When Christopher took Joshua to Autumn, she glanced at him briefly before quickly looking away, showing no interest. I watched this from the kitchen while preparing. It seemed accepting Joshua was still difficult for her. Yet I thought it was a progress that she came to our house. With this in mind, I continued with the party preparations. I had ordered pizza and other foods for the adults via delivery in advance, so that was already taken care of. I wanted to prepare Joshua's baby food myself and had been preparing it since the night before. It hadn't been long since the in-laws arrived, but finally everything from decorations to food was ready. Satisfied with Joshua's meal preparations, I felt like I had accomplished everything necessary. Christopher helped with setting up the food for the adults now arrayed on the table. All that was left was to see Joshua and bring his meal to him. As I reached for Joshua's food, intending to carry it, Autumn suddenly blocked my way in the kitchen. Excuse me? Autumn, with her usual cold gaze, walked past me and placed a packet of instant ramen she was carrying next to the sink. Surprised to see the instant ramen, I lost my words and just stared at it when Autumn started looking around, seemingly searching for something. Autumn, what are you looking for? Is there no kettle? Oh, the kettle. I put Joshua's food back in its place and retrieved a kettle from the storage where I had been keeping cooking utensils. Autumn quickly snatched it from me, filled it with water, and put it on the stove to heat. Do you not like pizza? I asked her while the water was heating, but she didn't respond. Wondering why she chose instant ramen, I decided not to dwell on it again and lifted Joshua's meal to take it to him, but Autumn immediately stopped me. Wait! Confused, I put the food back down. What could this be about? I decided to wait until Autumn left the kitchen, staying put, but the silence between the two of us was unnerving. Christopher occasionally looked over worriedly, but he seemed unable to come over because Dad and my siblings were engaging him in conversation. While this was happening, the water boiled and Autumn prepared the instant ramen. Then, to my shock, she started discarding Joshua's meal, one item at a time, into the trash right in front of me. Wait, what are you doing? I protested, but Autumn kept throwing the food away. Seeing the meal I had painstakingly prepared being discarded by Autumn made me feel sad. Move aside! She brushed past me, still frozen in place, and headed towards Joshua. Christopher and our parents watched, wondering what she was going to do. Unbothered by their gaze, Autumn placed the instant ramen in front of Joshua. Of course, Joshua, not understanding what was happening, looked back and forth between Autumn and his parents, seemingly amused. This is what happens with a dropout child, Autumn said, her lips curling into a smile, seemingly amused by her own remark. We were all stunned and couldn't comprehend the meaning of her actions, frozen in shock. As everyone looked at Autumn in silence, she seemed to think we didn't understand her point and let out a heavy sigh before repeating herself. That's what I mean. A child born to a fool will inevitably be a fool. It's foolish to spend time and prepare lavish meals for such a predictable outcome. Instant raiment should be enough, don't you think? Autumn said, laughing loudly as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. I was beyond anger or shock, having passed through those emotions. What is she even saying? I thought to myself, bewildered. It seemed everyone else felt the same. No one spoke or moved, and only Joshua continued to be cheerfully oblivious. The tense atmosphere was first broken by Ryan. He picked up the instant raiment that had been placed in front of Joshua, walked past me as I stood frozen, and threw it all in the sink. Ryan said something to me, but I couldn't hear him. My focus was entirely on Autumn.
Do you even understand what you just said?
Christopher, coming to his senses, his face flushed with anger, glared at Autumn. Unfazed by Christopher's intensity, Autumn turned away, not listening to him.
Apologize to everyone right now,
Christopher demanded, his fists clenched, but Autumn seemed unrepentant, shrugging her shoulders and tilting her head. Why should I apologize for stating the truth?
Don't mess around.
Christopher's shout echoed throughout the house in response to Autumn's words. Startled by his voice, Joshua, who had been laughing and playing until then, stiffened and began to cry loudly. Snapped back to reality by his cries, I hurried over to Joshua. He clung tightly to my clothes, his face turning red with tears. See, a child with a poor mind can't understand the situation and cries like this. Do they think everything can be solved by crying? Autumn sneered at Joshua in my arms, but even Ryan, usually restrained, intervened. Taking Autumn's hands, he apologized to us.
I'm very sorry for this. We will leave now. Abigail, I apologize for the unpleasant experience.
Ryan looked genuinely remorseful as he forcefully pulled Autumn, who was protesting, and began to leave the living room. Wait, please. I stopped the two of them, handed Joshua over to Christopher, and approached Ryan and Autumn. It seems there's been a misunderstanding, so I just want to say, as of today, I'm a Harvard graduate, I said with a wry smile, scratching my temple and looking alternately at Ryan and Autumn. In truth, I had always wanted to complete my high school education, but while I was dating Christopher, I couldn't save enough money to take any action. However, after marrying Christopher and with his support, I easily finished high school. Initially, I was satisfied with just completing high school, but then Christopher encouraged me to go to college as well. With his support, I decided to take a chance and apply to Harvard University, a place I thought was out of my reach. Surprisingly, I was accepted and went on to complete my degree there. I graduated today, and I received my diploma earlier this morning. So, because of that, as of today, I am a Harvard graduate. I could finally say it with pride. I had planned to announce my graduation at Joshua's half-birthday party, so even my family didn't know. Naturally, Autumn was also unaware and looked utterly shocked. Her eyes went wide and mouth agape. Why don't you come up with a more believable lie if you're going to lie? Autumn said with a strained smile, clearly skeptical. Expecting such a response, I had my diploma ready at hand and quickly unfolded it in front of Autumn. Seeing the diploma, her surprise deepened. Well, I acknowledge Abigail's effort, but it's not just about her. Your entire family is poor and uneducated, right? It's all in the genes anyway. She retorted, perhaps in a last attempt at defiance. Crossing her arms, Autumn then turned her gaze to my family, who were watching intently. It seems you're also mistaken about something else. My dad is a Harvard graduate and my mom graduated from Stanford. My brother and sister, too, are Stanford alumni, I clarified. Also, didn't I explain before, my family being poor was only for a short time after I finished middle school? Now my parents are doing quite well. Dad has started his own company and is earning $3 million a year. And Mom is a researcher with a decent income. I thought I had mentioned my parents' background during the family meeting, but it seems I only thought I had and nothing was actually communicated. Not to brag, but my dad's company had grown significantly, employing about 30 people. In fact, I heard that the legal advisor for my dad's company is a manager of Ryan's law firm. As I said this, my dad, who had been quiet until now, stood up and joined me. He handed his business card to Ryan, who looked so shocked his eyes seemed about to pop out.
Well, the world is a small place. I only found out recently myself, but seeing Autumn makes me hesitant to ask any more favors. I'm reluctant to entrust my employees to someone who only judges by educational background,
my dad said with a gentle smile while Ryan turned pale. Ryan quickly corrected Autumn's posture and they both apologized deeply.
I'm very sorry. I will take responsibility for my wife's behavior. Please, don't let this affect our business relationship,
Ryan pleaded. Dad watched Ryan and Autumn earnestly apologizing for a while, then turned to me.
What do you think we should do, Abby?
I really don't know what to say to that, I replied with a wry smile. Obviously, Dad had no intention of doing anything to Ryan. He probably judged that this time they had gone too far. Dad seemed almost amused, a mischievous smile on his face.
Is it all right, Caleb?
Christopher asked, addressing my dad, who looked too amused standing in front of us. Then, without meeting Autumn's gaze, who was still complaining, Christopher stood firmly, his arms crossed.
We will never meet with Mom again. Joshua won't see her either. We're cutting off the relationship.
Upon hearing this, Autumn, who had been passively apologizing under Ryan's direction, suddenly looked up alarmed and turned to face Christopher, but Christopher's expression was serious. With no hint of joking, I agreed with him on this decision. Continued interaction with Autumn might harm Joshua, and I couldn't forgive her for insulting not only me, but also Joshua and the rest of my family. Autumn tried to cling to Christopher, but he completely ignored her. Finally, Ryan led her back home and we restarted Joshua's half-birthday party as if nothing had happened. A few months later, Ryan contacted us. Christopher, who had not cut off communication with Ryan, answered the phone without hesitation. This is what Christopher learned from Ryan. Ryan and Autumn had divorced after the incident. Although Autumn was strict about education, it turns out she didn't graduate from a particularly prestigious university. After graduating, she immediately married Ryan, so she didn't have much experience in society.
She is going to have a tough time,
Christopher said, indicating that neither he nor Ryan intended to help Autumn anymore. Months later, after visiting Ryan, we stopped by a supermarket and unexpectedly saw Autumn there. It appeared that Autumn was working at the supermarket we stopped by as she was wearing its uniform. However, she seemed to be having trouble fitting in, receiving warnings from various staff members. Among them was a boy who looked like a high school student scolding her, and Autumn was repeatedly apologizing. Watching the scene, Christopher remarked,
"It will be a good experience for her."
He laughed, and I couldn't help feeling a bit sorry for her. Well, by now, there was nothing more we could do, so we left Autumn at her job and went home. 2 years have passed since then. Our family continues to live happily, and Joshua is about to turn 3. He has grown into an energetic little boy, and while he keeps me quite busy, our life is joyfully full.